Hello, Brovs. We're back with the 7 Deadly Sins. Chapter 3. Well, I guess it's not a chapter. It's just one of the deadly sins. And it's covetousness, which is a fortuitous opening here. Since I opened right to the right page. Actually, I think, yeah, there you go. Covetousness, the downfall of Jonathan Edax. By Cyril Connolly. After all, Jonathan... Actually, this is a longer entry, so it'll be 2 different videos, 2 consecutive videos. After all, Jonathan, you can't take it with you. At lunch yesterday, Friday, from Brenda, that hoary old cliche again, it set me thinking. Of course, logically, one couldn't. There's no point in actually being buried with the loot like Tutankhamun, though I would enjoy the sight of my coffin being followed to the vault by a procession of packing cases and tea chests, crated rather than cremated. For the present, if nobody minds, I'm quite content to stay here. But come to think of it, there is a way of taking it with one, and that is to endow the whole thing as a museum. One preserves one's name, and it keeps the collection together. More than one dare expect from one's own family. They shall have front seats at the opening if they can get away from their jobs. I can picture their faces. I'm certainly not going to take them with me. The Edax Foundation, a small, closed collection, museum and library open thrice yearly to the general public, with microfilm material available to accredited students. Endowed by Mr. Jonathan Edax, this small closed collection contains some of the choicest examples of etc., etc., illustrating the taste and discrimination of its munificent founder. A fitting memorial to the days when it was still possible for one man, etc., etc. The human eye deteriorates all it looks at. Whoever wrote that should be my first curator. Museum, mausoleum, except on the 3 annual viewing days, the collection should be kept in permanent darkness. Farrell would have approved, but what about tomb robbers? Photoscopic devices, the most up-to-date in existence, give instant warning of the minutest disturbance, such as the flashing of a light. But these are morbid thoughts. My collections are incomplete, and I am still here to complete them. I shall go round to this little Truslove. He's sure to be away. Thomas Truslove, my oldest friend, once a most gifted young poet, he is now completely forgotten and spends all his time on television, editorial boards, pen club activities, Book of the Month clubs, and American lecture tours. Last week in Buffalo, this week in Rome. He only comes to England in his sabbatical year, but, and this is the point, he continues to be deluged with every pamphlet, every privately printed book that comes out. You can't find anything at Trustlove's. When I go around, I always take a second edition of something or a second issue or a defective copy and substitute it when his back's turned for the right one. To him that hath shall be given. He never notices, only likes painting anyway. Sometimes he tries most generously to present me with my own rejections, the ignorant booby. Today I took round a second edition of Hopkins. Virginia Truslove opened the door. You've come to see Thomas? He's in Borneo, but he'll be back tomorrow morning. We're lunching with the Clarks. I gave her the gimlet gaze. I've come to see you. Virginia was what some people would consider still a beautiful woman. She looked rather flustered. Mille grazie. Do come in. I put down my coat in the hall and walked straight into the library. Would you like some tea? Nothing better. I'd give my soul for a nice cup of tea, the way you always make it. I'll get it myself. It always works. Drinks. No, too often they're on the table. But tea! I'd give my soul for it, and down she goes to the basement. 10 clear minutes and always a warning rattle on the way back. Sure enough, there was the right Hopkins, 1918. The exchange was the work of a moment, and I dived into the pamphlets. Poems written in discouragement, only 50 copies, to my young friend Thomas the Rhymer, W.B. Yeats. Proofrock and other observations, to Thomas from Tom. I didn't know where to begin. Even in my inside jacket pocket, a slim volume might run a slim risk of being detected. Dear Thomas, even you won't dare to print this. Ezra. Jiminy Cricket. What shall it be? Or why not all three? Oh, wasn't I quick? That's the electric kettle. I hope you haven't been too bored. Just leafing through a few of Thomas's old circulars. Aren't they a nuisance? As soon as he comes back, we're going to have a thorough clean-out. Books are bad enough, but manuscripts, letters, he's kept everything. Would you like me to go through them for you? How angelic, but why should you do all this for me? For an excellent reason. And I looked down at her with my gimlet glance. There ought to be a law against it. Look at this one. With some trepidation, Dylan. Why can't all these poets let poor Thomas alone? Nobody can print anything without inflicting a copy on him. He's like the British Museum. I could start right now. We better wait till he comes back. We might throw away a drawing by mistake. He won't be long. He's only gone to deliver a message at a conference in Borneo. He's beamed at the Orient, you know. Fortunate fellow. She put the pamphlets back in the glass-fronted bookcase and set the tea tray on the table. Damned interference. When I got home with my Hopkins, Brenda was waiting. Jonathan, where have you been? Went to return a book to old Trustlove. Caroline's fallen downstairs. Did she hurt herself? No, thank God, not this time. Well, then it's not very important. It happens to be important because she fell downstairs because you won't put up a gate. And you won't put up a gate because you're too mean to spend £3 on one because all your money goes on candlesticks and teapots and filthy old books and china and glass and furniture and silver and candlesticks and teapots. Teapots, it's quite true. I had been too busy with that bookcase to have a proper look. The Trustloves were just the kind of people to inherit some Queen Anne. Back to the Trustloves first thing tomorrow. Teapots with no tea, decanters with no wine, centerpieces for non-existent dinners, and Caroline could break her neck for all you'd care. Why don't you get the gate yourself? Out of what you give me? Now, I happen to have read that small children have a very good sense of self-preservation. Don't tell that to Dorothy Block, even when descending stairs, and that if they do fall, their little bodies with so much fat and water content are extraordinarily resilient. I shut myself into my study and accommodated Hopkins. I am gall, I am heartburn, among my recent acquisitions. A few minutes later, the telephone rang. It's me, Virginia. I'm so worried. Thomas has just cabled he's stopping off at Jakarta to judge some Indonesian abstracts. He'll be late for the Clarks and miss his lit society. What shall I do? You'd better take me with you. Oh, what a good idea, John. You're so thoughtful. John, you're so thoughtful for me. I remembered that I hadn't quite finished my egg at luncheon and retired to the pantry. The Clarks, veritable cave di Aladdin. My luck was in. I found the egg and went back to my study. When I stand up before my largest bookcase, I call it being at the controls. I feel like a captain on the bridge, or Sandy McPherson at his Wurlitzer. I expect the whole thing to sink down through the floor at the end of my virtuoso performance. This evening I took out the keys of the plate chest. Then I inspected the green and yellow Savres, the Vincennes, the Chelsea, and some of the Meissen, and went back to the controls again. That Yeats, that Eliot, that Auden manuscript, perhaps weighed a few ounces between them, occupied the same space as one bad novel, yet were worth several £100 and represented, for me, the conclusion of years of search and patient effort. Good old Trustlove, if he'd only been born a few years earlier, and had been given Mosada or a Lume Spento. God's most deep concern. Clunky, I understand, but there we go. Bitter would have me taste. My taste was me. I couldn't get Hopkins out of my head. My taste was me. What a title for an autobiography. And when one's taste is flawless, near perfect, and matched by a nose and an eye for a bargain and a bump of curiosity and righteous ambition to spoil the Philistine, there's no end to what one can pick up. To know what someone else values is to be already on the way to possessing it. Saturday. Today I woke with the tiny worry. On the landing I heard Brenda and Caroline. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, no doubt a charming maternal tableau. Then I remembered, why hadn't I noticed the teapot? After our lunch, we must go back there, and I would take a few old copies of Horizon and Penguin New Writing to stuff up any gaps I made in the tidying. With silver and china, it's not so easy. One can't borrow somebody's dinner service or pocket a garniture de cheminée. One has to learn to carry cash and make unpredictable offers. Carry cash, that hurts. Still, I am a gentleman, and a gentleman is someone who can reasonably expect to live in the same style and demand the same treatment as his forefathers in a society which has gone completely haywire. The world owes me a living, says the parasite. No, I owe myself a living, says the gentleman. Let Edax hold what Edax held, and a little bit over for safety. Telephone, it's me, Virginia. Jonathan, I'm so worried. I've rung up the Clarks and they'd rather the lunch was put off till Thomas got back. And now I've no one to lunch with today. The skinflints, to hell with all of them. Well, lunch, is never very easy for me, but perhaps we can meet afterwards. But if you were free to lunch with the Clarks, I thought perhaps you might, and get poisoned in one of those filthy restaurants. I see a man got thrombosis from scallops Mornay. Well, then, you must come and lunch here. I'll have to see what I can do with my own fair fingers, but don't expect the Crown Derby. You have some Crown Derby? Well, I don't know what it is, of course. Why do they all say, of course? But I do know it's fearfully old, and Granny thought the world of it. It's supposed to be terribly valuable. It sounds like Mason's ironstone. What's that? I said we'll have to turn it over and look at the marks. No need to be improper. Very well, then, 1 o'clock. Silly bitch. The last woman I took out to lunch cost me 12,000 pounds for 4 words. Well, with her, yes, you could say it made 5 words. I could still hear her in the next room with her kitchen cough, moving about and making lists of all the things that she and Carolyn simply had to have. Shoes, shirts, sheets, socks, chalks, each item more perishable than the last. And the Spanish girl with her list, too. Thank God there was one sane person in this household of crazy women. The Edax endowment. I thought at the controls. Some of my books, some of the rarest, have other people's bookplates, coats of arms, country house libraries. People with country house libraries are among the biggest suckers in existence. Should I leave the bookplates in or steam them off, or leave it to the executors? But who are my executors? Do I know a single person who isn't a bloody fool? One might choose an heir by examination. My will would be an examination paper or a treasure hunt, but with all these bibliographies flying around, they'd be bound to cheat. But today I shall put it aside. I feel sound as a Getty, and all a tingle for the chase. Jonathan, where are you going? Out to lunch for a change. But your egg, stuff it. And the shopping money? Borrow from the Spanish girl. Jonathan, do you realize you haven't paid her wages for 3 weeks? Caroline's shoes are worn out. Do you expect us to live on air? When do you think I last went to the hairdresser? Oh, for God's sake, get a long playing record of yourself and send it to the Naggers Club. Best years of your life. Worn your fingers to the bone. Waiting on me hand and foot. All the jazz. The usual screams and yowls in which Caroline joins with automatic mimicry. Thank God somebody keeps his head in this bedlam. Luckily, I had chosen my cane and so had no further cause to linger. I blessed the Fermier general who had selected the perfectly fitting gold pommel with the reassuring Chinissoir Saure, I don't know what the hell that word is, and I blessed the country house croquet set where I had found it. The Spanish girl. Once the trust love's proudest possession. Nothing she wouldn't do. Laundry, mending, no evening out. I soon got my eye on her. Took a bit of winkling, too. I told her that her employers were atheists who would probably poison her. Brenda is a Catholic, you see. Marriage is a life sentence with her, so I give and expect no quota. I had to go to church myself just to convince the chica and listen to the sermon. Nor his ox, nor his ass, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, all the jazz. These Spaniards eat you out of house and home. One of my grievances against old Truslove is that he would choose to live halfway between two fair stages. One either has a goodish walk or has to go on and break into a coin. Luckily, it was a fine day. Virginia opened the door. Look at him. Isn't he smart? With the hat and the cane and the Sherlock Holmes profile. Positively satanic. Damned impertinence. You don't look too bad yourself. She was what our ancestors called a handsome woman, chivalrously adding, very fine eyes. Poor Truslove, 20 years of marriage, say £1 a week to feed her, and another for pin money. Thousands of pounds down the drain. Every woman after 40 is a wasting asset. I know how you love beautiful things. I've got all my treasures. We sat down to a fricassee of chicken and a bottle of rosé. Kings patterned everywhere. All the silver was heavily embossed, and the Crown Derby was quite respectable Coalport. The place for good china is under lock and key. I wagged an admonitory finger. And now, since you've spoilt me so thoroughly, may I make one more request? Granted, as soon as asked. Can we have tea instead of coffee? She looked rather sadly at the Kona machine. I'll go and make it myself. 5 minutes ago, with that damned electric kettle, I made a rush at the bookcase. It was locked. It was one of those big mahogany efforts, and there, behind the glass, I could see all the presentation copies and the enigmatic plain backs of the slimmer volumes. It wasn't really locked, I discovered, only jammed. Otherwise, I should have felt deeply insulted. I gave a good pull, and the whole front came away. The hinges had gone. A sheet of glass fell forward and splintered round my head, badly cutting the hand which I raised to protect it. Virginia entered with the tray. Oh, you poor thing, let me bandage it. You must have a tourniquet. Why, you bled all over the manuscripts. It was true. Thomas, even you won't dare to print this, had become completely illegible. She thrust the pamphlet in my pocket. Here, have one of these for luck. And then I spotted the teapot. It was hexagonal, genuine Queen Anne. I even got it up high enough to see the Britannica standard. One would commit murder for such a piece, or worse. What havoc it would wreak among my Georgian urns and melons. It would run to thousands. Jonathan, said Virginia, I've been wanting to talk to you for a very long time. You're not happy, are you? I gave her the old gimlet. Poor old John, you can't deceive me. You see, I know all about you and Brenda. There's nothing to know. Yes, that's just what I do know. And I know you only married her because she was engaged to Thomas. Virginia. And when you took Brenda, can't you see, Jonathan? There was nothing left for me to do but marry him. Virginia, stop. And I know, too, what a marriage with nothing is like, because that's what mine is. Married to a poster, a voice on a dictaphone, an airplane reservation. We can't go on like this, Jonathan. I'm 40 now, and you must be... Virginia, wait, don't worry. You shall have me. You've been so sweet, so patient, so understanding, coming always to see me when he's out. Yet never a word disloyal to him, always his best friend. Don't think I haven't noticed, dispelling my loneliness, my emptiness, and you so big, so quiet, so kind. Virginia! Wait, silly. I'm all yours now. Listen, I've cabled. Don't hurry back. Clark's lunch postponed. All well, Virginia. Now aren't I rather clever? Virginia, the teapot. Whose is it? Mine, you silly Billy. Do you think we would be drinking tea out of it at this moment if it were his? Do you think I wouldn't protect your chivalry? Whither I go, it goes, my dowry. It will be about all I have. There used to be a silly old kettle on a stand as high as myself. Virginia, I feel faint. My wrist, I must see a doctor. No, I can walk, thank you. Once in the street, I pulled out the pamphlets. The pamphlet she had given me, unbelievable, the ultimate rarity. The Bourbon Rose and Other Poems by Alberic Shute. Privately printed, Newport, Pagnell, 1886, his first book, of which up till now only 2 copies were known, Hayward's and the Bodleians. Alberic Shute, that exquisite talent, silenced, it was said, by some evil tentacle of the Wilde scandal after his third and most remarkable book of poems. He would be nearly 90 now if this post-Raphaelite pre-imagist were alive. If he were alive, why not? And if he is alive, then he shall inscribe the Bourbon Rose for me. And I will possess a better copy than either of the others. I made for the telephone box. There he was, Alberic Shute, Squire's Mount, Hampstead. Should I ring up to make sure? Often the worst of all methods. First they hang up on you, and then they won't let you in. Desperate occasions require desperate remedies. I took a taxi. When I rang the bell, there was a commotion. The door was opened by an elderly man. "Can I see Mr. Shute?" "Mr. Shute is very ill indeed and can see no one. The matter is extremely urgent. I am afraid any question of urgency is now purely relative." The last word gave me a clue. "You see, I am his son. Mr. Shute was unmarried." "That is my tragedy, not his. Your name? It would mean nothing. Here are my credentials." I held up the book to him. "Newport Pagnell. Yes, he did live here for a very considerable time. Well, you had better come in. I am Dr. Prout." He led me through to a room on the ground floor. "I should warn you, it may come at any moment. My patient is in uremia." It was a small sitting room with no good pieces into which a brass bed had recently been moved. On this was lying a tiny old man with closed eyes and a nose like a tin opener, his hands milking the coverlet. A nurse was standing by. She held a finger to her lips. With my cane in my bandaged hand and the bourbon rose in the other, I tiptoed over. I have managed to live more years than I care to consider without any close experience of death. There is nothing in such a phenomenon to appeal to the collector. The foothills of death and love are, however, hunting grounds for such of us as lay up treasure on earth and pursue enduring artifacts rather than the illusions of common humanity. I have often found a long face at a memorial service lead to substantial pickings. I was brooding on certain gaps that still needed closing before my serried ranks of Americana could be brought up. The battle strength when the nurse disappeared behind a screen. Almost immediately, the sick man opened his eyes and seemed to want to sit up. He favored me with a penetrating stare. I brandished the bourbon rose before him and reached for my pen, but to do that I had to lean the cane against the bed, and a rash movement of his caused it to slip so that the heavy gold knob with its mandarins and pagodas fell with a clatter on the parquet. With glaring eye, the old poet tried to heave himself up and thrust forward, his hand jerking at me as the nurse rushed round. "You!" he gasped and fell backward. I had enough presence of mind as the doctor entered to retrieve my cane and sink my head on my arms. "My father." I was more than relieved to get away on a pretext that I had to telephone, and I had run quite a distance from Squire's Mount, my black felt hat in one hand, my cane in the other, before I realized that I had left the bourbon rose behind. Agony! I felt such a stinging sense of loss that I could almost have wept. The greedy old bastard. By felicitous combinations of the London transport system, I made my way home, for I pined to be at the controls again. My reference library alone is more extensive than all the books to be found in an ordinary household. It starts in my bedroom and spills over the upper landing. I can trace the mark on a piece of china, the owners of a crest, the rubric of a goldsmith, the succeeding possessors of a book or manuscript, the vicissitudes of some piece in the sale room. In a matter of minutes, they are the jig tools of my occupation. Before letting myself in, I sent off 3 cables to Trustlove, care of Pen Club, Jakarta, British Council, Singapore, and Nehru, Delhi. Clark's up, fed, threaten off, brush, hurry. Then I made a dash for the landing. Great God! At the top of the stairs, a hideous little gate of white metal, stuck onto the wall at each side by suction pads, for a household of hurdlers. "Brenda," I shouted. She came out, smiling. "I thought you'd be surprised. Now our daughter, for you seem to forget that she is yours, and as well as mine, can grow up without it risking her life every few minutes. How did you pay for it?" "I charged it." "You have no account." "I put it down on yours." "You put it down?" I felt a lump of rage surge up and choke me, like when Caroline tore the book jackets. "You filthy, extravagant slut, I'll sue you. Anal erotic madman. I'll put a notice in the papers. I'll hound you out of my house." The telephone rang in my bedroom. I permit no outgoing calls. "It's me, Virginia. Darling, he's on his way back. We must leave at once. I'm desperate. Impossible. I can't even see you again. Then I shall kill myself. Now. Goodbye." These crazy women suddenly had a vision in all of its leaden moon-glow perfection of the little hexagonal teapot. Now was my chance. I ran out of my room and took a flying kick at that bloody gate. Ah! A verdict of death by misadventure was returned on Mr. Jonathan Edax, the well-known connoisseur and collector who broke his neck by falling down the stairs at his home in Holland Park on Saturday night. The stairs were exceptionally steep, and a gate had recently been installed at the top of them by Mrs. Edax. It had presumably been insecurely attached. The deceased had appeared to be in a disturbed frame of mind at the prospect of making his will. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Truslove were present at the inquest, but were not called upon to give evidence. Jonathan Hagan Edax was born in 1895 at Bedford, where his father was a prosperous solicitor. After completing his studies, he had early made his mark in the correspondence columns of learned periodicals and was soon recognized as a formidable opponent in the auction room at a time when it was still possible for one man, etc., etc. And as you can see, I lied. I actually finished it, which I didn't think was possible, but these are rather short passages. The pages are brief. Next time, Gluttony by Patrick Leigh Fermor. Goodbye, bruv.